So here is the revision technique that I think really pushed me to that grade 9 standard. Hello friends, so as you can probably tell by the title, I did get a grade 9 in GCSE English Literature, so I thought in today's video I'd just show you how. So just for context, I did do AQA, but I'm pretty sure that a lot of these tips can, be transferred to different exam boards too. I will be sharing any resources that I used, and of course I will link them all in the description box so you can find them easily down there. And also feel free to skip around the video as I have included timestamps. So a bit of background about me in English. I've always liked English, but when I started the GCSE course, I kind of felt that the difficulty level increased quite a bit more. I found the homework more challenging and so were the assessments, so I did have to work quite a lot harder to achieve top grades. Also, the texts that I did were An In Spectacles, Jane Eyre, The Power and Conflict Poetry, Romeo and Juliet, and I think that's pretty much it. And I would recommend reading each of your texts or poems at least twice, just because I think it's important that you get to know your text really well before you start doing any work on it. So the first section of this video will be on revision guides and textbooks. So the first revision guide that I purchased was this CGP English Literature and Language revision guide, and I mostly got this just because all of my other textbooks for my subjects were this kind of brand, so I thought it'd be quite nice to have all of the same. However, I was very wrong. This was quite useless to me because it was generic to all texts, so it wasn't specified to any of the texts that I was doing, so it mainly gave kind of tips and how-tos for certain question styles, and in my opinion I think it was more targeted towards people who kind of struggled with the basics, so you know how to answer different questions and that sort of thing. The second revision guide that I got was this one for Romeo and Juliet by York Notes, and I bought this in a hunt for a good revision guide that would give me some quite high level analysis, but I did soon realise that this was definitely not what it was for. It did have quite good summaries on different characters and each of the acts, as you can see here, so it has quite good summaries, but it really didn't have that high level analysis and not much analysis at all. And I guess I should have known, because a textbook like this is meant for people of all levels, so I couldn't really expect it to have very advanced analysis, which was kind of a mistake on my part. But yeah, I would just be wary of getting a book like this if you are looking for that higher level analysis, because it probably won't come in like a textbook like this. And the questions in here, they did have a few questions, but I just didn't find that they really furthered my understanding of the text very much, so I didn't really use it at all and I didn't find it that helpful. The third revision guide that I had was a Jane Eyre CGP revision guide, and I got this mostly because I was really struggling to get into the text, and usually I really do like to read and I will read almost anything, but I think it's because I really do not like romance novels. I find them very tedious and cliche. And overall I just really didn't like reading Jane Eyre. Naturally, I didn't feel like reading it, I didn't want to read it, so I did buy the revision guide just so that it would help me get through the book and I could read the summaries at the same time as reading the book, because I did find the language was a bit dense. And this book was actually really helpful because it kind of made the information that I was given in the book more easy to read and more enjoyable for me. So I would really recommend getting a revision guide like this for the text that you're doing if you just don't like it like I did, because it kind of motivates you to get on with the book, it helps you get through the book, and you do need to read the book, so if this helps you to do that, then I would definitely recommend. So in conclusion, I would say if you are looking for revision guides and textbooks, I would only really get them if you are struggling with the text that you're reading. If you are aiming for the top grades and you already understand your texts, then I wouldn't really recommend, because I wouldn't say that the analysis is very high level at all, and the ideas in there are just quite basic, and I feel like a lot of people would use them, so it probably wouldn't give you that kind of extra edge in the exam. Now I'm going to move on to the revision resources that I made for the texts. So the way that I did it was by making these kind of spider maps for each character and theme in the text. So I will show you an example now, and I just wanted to say that we did drop Jane Eyre, so that's why I don't have many revision resources for that text, because we didn't really get to do much on it. So here is an example of one that I made for Sheila from an Inspector Calls. It's just an A3 spider map with lots of ideas on it with, you know, the title in the middle. So the way that I made them was by having kind of 3 different colours that I used for each of the assessment objectives in English. So in English there are 3 assessment objectives. So AO1 is the point that you're making in your essay, AO2 is the analysis of the text, and then AO3 is context of the time of the text, and then its relationship with the text itself. So I'll just show you an example with this one from Sheila that I made. So as you can see, my AO1 points are done in the purple highlighter in the bubbles. So those are my AO1 points. Then my analysis, aka AO2, is done in the black pen. So as you can see, quite a bit of analysis. And then the dark purple, for example there, is the quotes that I'm using. I just like to have quotes in a different colour just to make them stand out a bit more. And then finally these kind of lighter purple parts are the context and, you know, how it illuminates my understanding of the text. This allowed me to only spend time writing about each of the assessment objectives, aka what was going to get me the marks in the exam, so I wasn't wasting time writing anything that basically wasn't going to get me the marks. And I made these for every single character and theme, which was quite helpful. So here are a few more examples. There we have one for Juliet from Romeo and Juliet. We have one for Mr. Burling, and then we have Eric Burling. And the way that I actually revised from these was by blurting. So again, I would just put the character name in the middle and I would just blurt everything that I could remember from the map. And it was really useful in the exam because I could just visualize the map and have all of my ideas just right there. Your next question is probably, how did I actually come up with the content to write on these maps? So how did I actually make them? So the first thing that I would do is take my school book and just transfer any of the good ideas that we did in class into a Google Doc. Here's one of the pages that I must have made in school, and then I would just transfer any of the ideas from here into a Google Doc just by making a few short bullet points. And then I would just add to these points just by thinking of more ideas, different interpretations that I could use and that sort of thing. I would then use some YouTube channels such as Mr. Sal's or Stacey Rie, I think is another good one for ideas for analysis. However, I wouldn't outright copy them just because I think it's good to have kind of your own ideas. And just get inspiration off of those videos, because, you know, a lot of people are going to be watching those videos and you don't want to have the same points as other people, because at the end of the day, examiners want to read something new and interesting and innovative. They don't want to be reading the same thing over and over again. So just like you would copy analysis from a textbook, don't outright copy stuff from YouTube channels unless it's an amazing point, which did happen a couple of times. I would say try and just springboard ideas off of them rather than just outright copy them. I really liked Mr. Sal's grade 9 character videos and Stacey Rie's grade 9 focus videos, because they were really kind of aiming for that top high level analysis rather than kind of generic analysis. And also, since they're actual English teachers, they had quite a lot of advice on their channels with advice for exams and that sort of thing. Then I would amalgamate my own analysis, the analysis from the YouTube channels, and then my school's analysis into different main points. I would try to make these as developed and extended as I could, so that the only points that I was including on my map were ones that were really good, that I could write a lot about in the exam. Then I would just get a hold of my text. So for example, here's an Inspector Calls, and I would just look through and see what quotes I could include to support my argument. And then I would watch some Click revision episodes. I thought they were really good. My teacher really recommended to watch them. I will again link that all in the description box. And then I also looked at BBC Bite Size, and those two are really good for context. I would add any relevant context that kind of supported the points into the Google Doc again. Finally, I would just decide which were my strongest points, so which were the ones that were most developed, and I'd write that all onto a spider map so that the ideas were all kind of spread out and easy to look at and remember, rather than just a list of bullet points in a document that was very, very, very extensive. So please remember that this is not your final analysis, this isn't the be all and end all. You will have to keep evolving this analysis and adding to it and taking away from it, because there will obviously be some bits that you will come back to and be like, actually, I don't really agree with that, or I don't really like that anymore. So it's absolutely fine to keep developing it. I went through quite a few stages with my mind maps. At the end of the day, this is just going to help develop your analysis and make it better and better and more high level. So then a few different resources that I made that I found quite useful was this timeline sort of thing. So I would just have like the timeline of the play going across. So this is Freitag's Pyramid, and then I would just kind of track how the character developed across the play, which is quite good if you want to start thinking about some structural points. So here we have one for Juliet. Think about a few themes around the character and just track how they kind of changed throughout the play, which I thought was quite useful, and I did use a few of those points in my actual exam. Another resource that I made was this context diagram. Watch a few Click Revision episodes, watch a few YouTube videos, and then just kind of make a diagram of everything that they talked about. So I think I have in black the kind of factual context points, and then I would go back over it in pink to talk about how it actually helped my understanding of the text, just so that I was really including that part of it, because that is kind of the most important part of including context, is how does it help your understanding of the text, how does it make your understanding better. Another resource which I found perhaps the most important for me was what I like to call my kind of grade 9 essay checklist. So throughout the year I noticed that my teacher would specifically mention things that we would need to be doing. So I just made a list of everything that my teacher had spoken about, that the YouTuber teachers that I was watching were speaking about, and just amalgamated them into a foolproof list of everything that I'd heard of that a student would need to put in an essay in order for them to achieve a grade 9. And by the end of the course, I did start to realise that there were certain specific things that you must have in your essay in order for you to get a grade 9. So I would write all of these specific things that my teacher gave me onto a list like this, and then every essay that I wrote after that, so every practice essay that I did, I would have this in front of me, and I would use this as kind of a mental check off, have I included all of this, and if I have, then I should be getting a good grade. And over time this just became ingrained in my memory, so when I was doing the exam I could literally just have it in my mind, and as I was checking I would just check off everything off the list that I could think of, and then by the end of the exam I was kind of happy that I have checked off everything, and so it put me in quite a good position for getting quite a good grade. I'm going to move on to quotations. So I know a lot of people kind of talk about quotations a lot and put a lot of pressure on memorizing quotations. However, I didn't really find it that hard to remember quotes, but I think that's just because I was using the same quotes in the same essays over and over again. So it wasn't really a struggle because I just used them so many times they've just become stuck in my memory. However, if you do struggle with kind of remembering quotes, or you have a few last minute quotes that you want to remember, I would just stick them in a Quizlet and then just use it on learn mode and just go through them. Another thing that I did leading up to the exams was just take a blank piece of paper, again blurt all the quotes that I could remember really fast onto a back of a sheet of paper. I think I actually have an example of the day before my exam. I literally put quotes for each of the characters and then just scribbled out all the quotes that I could remember that I would probably be using in the exam. And again, that's a very, very, very useful method of revision, because obviously it does include active recall. So now I'm going to move on to actually writing the essays. So first, introductions and conclusions. They are things that I still struggle to write, just because I find that because it's the first and last thing that you're writing, there's a lot of pressure to make it really, really, really good. So I really struggled to just get started and write something down because of them. So what really helped me was to have a template introduction and conclusion that I would use for every single essay after that. I would just adapt it to the essay title. This was really, really helpful because I didn't really have to think about what I was writing. The way that I came up with it was just by looking at some model answers and also asking my teacher, what's the best introduction that you've read? Can you kind of write down an example introduction that you think is kind of grade 9 appropriate? So here is the revision technique that I think really, really pushed me to that grade 9 standard. So what I would do is write out essay plans and then write that essay for every single character, every single theme, for every single text and every single poem. So you're going to need to figure out how you're going to plan in your exam. My teacher actually went through a bunch of different methods that we could use, so I just settled on one. I would just ask your teacher kind of what's the best planning method, and then I would just write the essay. Here comes the most important part of this method. After you write the essay, don't just read through it and then just give it a generic mark. I want you to take kind of different colours for each of the things on your essay checklist, and then highlight where you've used them, and then highlight where you've talked about each of the AOs. So for example, if you've done some analysis, then highlight it for the AO2 colour. If you've included some very good context, then highlight that in the AO3 colour, and you should, by the end of it, after a few tries, have a fully highlighted essay. And this means that you're not writing anything again won't get you marks, that isn't useful, that isn't adding anything to your essay. Here's an example of my essay plan. So it's not very pretty, but it really doesn't need to be, because in the exam you have 2 or 3 minutes to write out an essay plan, not ages, not 15 minutes. Again, I wrote the essay, squished my conclusion at the end there, and this is one of the earlier ones that I did. So as you can see, not everything is highlighted on the sheet, it's quite bare. Here's a better one. A lot of it here is more highlighted, so I was a lot happier with this essay. And a way that I would recommend to kind of improve your writing style is to just look at some model answers, so grade 9 answers to lots of essay questions. Mr. Sells had really, really, really good videos on this that I watched quite a lot, and I would just take notes on things that I really liked from those answers, things that I thought were impressive, things that he pointed out were impressive, and I just made a list of those things and made a conscious effort to include those in my essays. For the poems, I would just say do as much analysis as you can, analyse literally every single word. I also really like to create side-by-side comparisons of different themes in poems. For example, the theme of memory in Wall Photographer and Poppies, and I would just have the similarities and differences written down side by side in a Word document or just on a scrap piece of paper. Don't be afraid to be a bit more adventurous with your comparisons, because I think that makes it more interesting. And for unseen poetry, I would kind of say don't get stressed about it too much. Once you've started analysing content and getting used to kind of quickly analysing content in English, it will get a lot easier to do unseen poetry. The only thing for me with unseen poetry was the timing. What I would do is just take random poems from online. So for example, I would just search up poems about babies, poems about flowers, poems about childhood. Then I would just give myself like 3 minutes to analyse the poems, and then I would write a little essay on the theme of something in the poems, and that just gives you quite good practice on analysing material that you haven't necessarily seen before. And this is something that I again really struggled with at first, but practicing and practicing and practicing makes everything better. So I would just say keep going with it, even if you don't think you're very good at first. I wasn't, but you will improve over time. And remember that the analysis that you write in the unseen poetry exam doesn't necessarily have to match the standard of your kind of pre-prepared analysis. Just write something. Over time, your analysis style will actually start to evolve and you will refine it. And naturally in the exam, some things will just start to stick out at you and you will be able to write about them. And I'm going to include one last bonus tip in the video because I thought, why not just include it? So what I would say is, in the actual exam, you have to be extremely strict with your timing, because I found that there was just not enough time for me to be writing really long essays. And often I wouldn't finish my essays at the start of the year. So what helped me was to have a pre-decided plan of how I was going to spend my time in the exam. So for example, 8 minutes for a certain question, 10 minutes for another question, etc. And I would just write this at the top of my paper as a kind of like timetable for my exam, and I would just check it off as I was going along. And when the allocated time for that question was up, I had to be very disciplined and, cut off my time and just move on to the next question. So those are all the tips that I have for you today. I really do hope that it was useful for anyone who's doing GCSE English Literature. I did also want to say good luck if you are taking any exams in it, because I know it can be quite a hard subject at times. However, if you are willing to put in the hard work and effort, then it can be quite rewarding. This is actually the first video in my series of how I revise different GCSE subjects. So if you do have any kind of specific requests for any of the subjects that I did, then do let me know in the comments below. Feel free to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you enjoy this kind of content, because there is going to be quite a lot more of it coming up. So if you don't want to miss any of that, then make sure you do subscribe.